A badge of honor. Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today, and the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, you switched the screens. Hey, I was waiting to be on this side. Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, powered by the OBBM network. You can find us on all your streaming platforms, along with Apple and Roku TV on the OBBM network. Man, I want to start off the show first off with thanking all of our veterans here and abroad on this very happy Veterans Day. For without you, me and Sam would not be able to do this podcast. You're giving us the freedom to do what we have our channel to do it on, and without any restrictions. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Stay safe out there.
Absolutely. We love our veterans. John, you have veterans in your family. I have them in mine, in addition to numerous friends out there. And it is just a blessing to know each of you, and thank you for what you did fighting for freedom. Yeah. And hopefully we'll continue to turn this country, back into the freedom machine that it once was.
I got schooled today by my 86-year-old father-in-law, who is a veteran, CB6 back in the day. And it used to be called Armistice Day.
Armistice
Day. And they changed it. And, a lot of people have the misconception with Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Veterans Day honors our veterans who are alive and still fighting for our country. Memorial Day honors those who have passed. So Correct. Some people don't understand the difference. So we're just going to try to clear it up for you.
That is why we do not say Happy Memorial Day. It's a Remembrance Day. But with you and I and John, the other John and Jeff, team A Badge of Honor, if you will, we just got off an incredible Friday with some really powerful officers from around the DFW Metroplex here that really, not only did we get a chance to pour into them, but they in turn poured into us. It was a very deep and meaningful day spent. And we want to say thank you to them for all the ahas we gleaned, talking about exactly what you hear on the intro to the show, how to continue to smash the stigma and just understand that, the fight is every day, and it comes from awareness and continued understanding to really get alongside the officers out there, those that are veterans and non-veterans alike. But really, when they are working in, criminal investigations, and today's show we're talking about, human trafficking. We're in Texas. It is happening. Texas has been highlighted. It's not good news, frankly.
We are the hub. We are a hub.
It is not good news. And, our guests this evening, there is a stigma that if they're children, that they are being trafficked, that they live with, but also the adults that are part of this human trafficking. Forget the bad guys. They can just rot. But, they live with a stigma as well. And it takes empathy and understanding to really come alongside the victims of these crimes. And George is a current, he's a current police officer in North Carolina. He works in human trafficking, but he's worked in so many other different areas in policing. George, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we are excited to have you not only share some stories, but some best practices, because there's a lot that goes into fighting this thing called human trafficking. And before we dive in too deep into that, just please tell everybody watching and listening on their favorite podcast app about you, how you ended up being a cop, and now doing this thing called human trafficking.
Well, this is my 20th year. And in North Carolina, you have to go at 30 to retire. So I got 10 more years left. But before I was in law enforcement, I worked at a place called Youth for Christ. And I worked with at-risk kids. And I kept seeing my kids in my program. I kept losing my kids. And I got really frustrated because they were incredible kids. And I saw their brothers and their sisters and their older brothers and sisters and the kids in my program getting lost. And so I stepped back and I said, I'm losing this battle. What can I do to help make a difference? And so I decided to get into law enforcement because I wanted to go after those people who were recruiting the 6th and 7th graders or the 5th graders to run money and dope and recruiting my kids to do all sorts of stuff. And I saw the neighborhoods they were in and everything. And so I just wanted to make a difference. And the 9/11 hit right around the same time. And, you know, I kind of had the decision to make. And I decided that law enforcement was the direction I wanted to go.
Oh, that is
Appalling.
admirable. Yeah. It is hard to believe, 6th and 7th graders getting drawn into a world of crime. I mean, it's too late once they're in because they don't understand it. So that's like the education piece that we really need. Your shirt, says it all: save children before they need rescue. You did some time, I think, as an SRO, and talk a little bit about how that plays into it.
Well, so when I first got in law enforcement, I did patrol, and then I was a domestic violence detective. And then I had, at first, I kind of wasn't sure if it was a good move or a bad move, but I got switched to SRO. But I quickly learned that I could have just as much impact in the schools as I did anywhere doing detective work, domestic violence work, or anything like that. And I was able to take the skills that I had learned working at Youth for Christ and roll it over to being a school resource officer. And thank God I had done internet crimes against children work before I became an SRO, because honestly, I feel like had I not done that work before I became a school resource officer, I wouldn't have been half of the school resource officer I was. Because who has more opportunity to be around children and the things they do and being online than your school resource officer? Every day you're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of children. Most of your problems in your schools are probably going to be technology related, whether it be gossiping going on, inappropriate pictures going on. I'd say half the fights I dealt with were over things that were sent through, Snapchat, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now, Facebook, wherever, or whatever the new app is of the week. Kids that's how they communicated. And so I was constantly dealing with it, and having that prior experience of being an internet crimes against children officer, it just was a natural transition over into being a school resource officer. And it really allowed me the opportunity to have a good grasp on what was going on in my school. And I knew what to look for. I knew how to kind of deal with it. It allowed me to step into that world without having blinders on and having to learn it immediately. And that's why now I've become such a big advocate for making sure that your school resource officers are basically juvenile detectives just in uniform. Unfortunately, we send a lot of our maybe retired on duty people over there to spend their last year or two. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes we make in this profession now. Our children deserve so much better. Our schools deserve better, especially with all the school shootings. I mean, if you go back and look, there's so many times that there are warnings either through social media platforms or their YouTube videos and things like that. Just imagine what we miss every day by not having school resource officers who are up to date on technology and the apps and things that kids are using. It's just a golden opportunity. And then you also have the opportunity to be involved with those children. You have to show them that you care. Once the kids know that you care, it doesn't matter how goofy you are. It doesn't matter whether you're wearing a uniform or a polo or whatever. Once they know you care about them, they're willing to listen. And they may not admit it all the time, but I promise you, their ears will be opening up once they know you care. Because most of the kids who get in trouble, they don't wake up in the morning saying, I want to be that kid at school today. They got other stuff going on in their life. And so sometimes you just have to step back and say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. We got to take our first break, but when we come back, before the show, we were talking and you were telling John and I about some of the like red flags that not only school administrators, the SROs need to see, but also just us out in the public, especially if we're in the neighborhood and we know some of these kids. We got to take our first break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
It was a quote that has inspired me to start my business, to do something different, to be a radical, I guess, in the wireless industry. We started with trying to help customers with their cell phones first, find ways to reduce costs, try to make it easy for customers to get customer service, to solve customers' problems. And with that, all we ask is that they would just order through us to do an upgrade or new activation just as they would in a retail store. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to go with a guy that's actually going to help you save money instead of going to a place that all you are to them is a ticket to their next commission? We're here to help. Dave with Outer Bridge Industries, we are your bridge over troubled wireless.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with North Carolina detective, SRO officer, George Wilson. George, let me ask something. When we took the break, you said something about the SRO officers and the impact they have on our children. Most officers who are on the street, they are reactive. So the crime has already occurred. You have a chance as an SRO officer, and most officers that take this role seriously have a great chance of mentoring these kids into a life of a better life. So some of them they come from broken homes. They don't have a father or a mother figure in their homes. And as a SRO, you have that chance to really guide and develop and mold children into, productive adults. And that's what policing is all about. That's the fulfillment. When you can see a kid who was battling in the 7th grade all of a sudden graduate with honors in high school, and it was partly your doing an interaction with them, that's the most fulfilling aspect of police work.
Yeah, I have 2 great stories I can share with you about that. So I coached football when I was also a school resource officer. And I had one kid who his 7th grade year, I think we probably had almost 40 referrals to him to the front office. And so over the summer, I went to his mom and I was like, hey, I really would love for him to play football. And she's like, all right, fine. So right before school starts, he goes and gets a physical and everything. And he doesn't show up for the preschool workouts, but school starts. And I went to him and was like, hey, your mom said you need to come to ball practice. And he's like, screw cops and screw you. And he said some other choice words there. And so by the 3rd day, I walked up to him. I was like, hey, just to let you know, your mom's sitting outside. So either your mom can bring you to practice kicking and screaming, or you can at least come on out there. I was like, I'll leave it up to you how you want this to go. So he comes out to practice and he stands there with his arms crossed. Doesn't move the whole time, doesn't speak to anyone, nothing. And we kind of loosened him up a little bit. By the end of the year, he was starting both ways. He was by far one of the most raw, best athletes I have ever dealt with in my whole coaching career. That year, he had 0 referrals to the front office. It was the first time he had made AB honor roll since 3rd grade.
Wow.
It was like a whole nother kid. But
props, yeah.
But he had an avenue. He had an avenue, and he had coaches who he knew cared about him and that we were invested in him. And then as soon as football was over, he rolled straight over to wrestling, and he was in the heavyweight class. He went undefeated as an 8th grader in the heavyweight division, never having wrestled before. Nice. So that just speaks to the power of when kids know you care. And then like we had another ball player, and all of a sudden I was getting tons of referrals about this kid, and he was beating people up. And I mean, he was a big middle schooler. He had like bear claws for hands. All it took was one hit and other kids were out. And so finally I went to him. I was like, man, what is going on? This is not you. Well, me and the school nurse found out that their washing machine had been broken. And so he was wearing the same dirty clothes, and he only had so many outfits. And the kids finally started realizing he was just changing shirts and pants, and they weren't getting washed. And every time a kid would make fun of him, he would just basically knock them out. Well, we went over there, fixed that. And then in the meanwhile, we were washing his clothes at school. once we did that, he didn't get in trouble anymore.
Right.
But all it took was someone taking the time to sit down and saying, hey, man, what's wrong? Tell me what's going on. Why are you getting in these fights? Because this isn't you.
See, and it's the little things. I mean, how many kids are battling those same issues with either, dirty clothes, not enough clothes, holes in the sneakers, trying to fit in, and they have to fight their way through this, social, whatever the social hierarchy, and it does a lot of harm to their mental health.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's just like, I had teachers who would refer kids over for getting in trouble in class or sleeping or whatever, and part of me was like, well, that's not a school resource officer problem. That's a school problem. But then I would go back and look at our call history from the night before and see that our officers had been out there at 2:00 in the morning and they had a domestic out there all night. Well, of course they're going to come to school sleepy because they've been dealing with chaos all day. So, and like you said, some of these kids are hungry. If your belly's empty, your ears are closed. You can talk to a kid all day, but if their belly's empty, they're not listening to you. They're just trying to figure out where the next meal is going to come from. And that's true with anybody. And so that's one thing that really struck me was how many students were struggling with hunger. And so that is kind of where we started getting involved, and I started getting involved in trying to train my staff what to look for, not only through those things, but also kids who come to school and maybe they've went to 11 schools in 2 years. Maybe their native language is Spanish, but they're not fluent in Spanish and they're not fluent in English. Well, why is that? Why do they continuously start to skip schools? And that's what kind of morphs me into training my staff also for human trafficking issues. We have a golden opportunity every time a new student enrolls in a school. Every time I had a new student enroll, I would go and meet them with their families and away from their families. And then if they weren't fluent in English, I would get a teacher who was fluent in Spanish or whatever language. And we would sit there and I'd introduce myself, say, hey, this is who I am. Tell me about yourself. Tell me what's going on. And through that, I had a staff member who had a student who they really were concerned about. And so we kept them on our radar. And we worked together, stayed in touch. And then COVID hit with this student. And through some of the training we had done with our staff and through my Internet Crimes Against Children training, I taught them how important it was for our students to always log on with their laptops. Not only to do their schoolwork, but then that gave me IP addresses. So if there was ever an issue, I could pull IP addresses and figure out where my kids had been. So this one student had messaged the teacher that said, hey, can you bring me some food? I'm hungry. So the teacher said, well, why are you hungry? And she said, well, they hide the food from me if I don't work hard enough. And so that was a huge red flag to the teacher. And so she came and got me, and I told her, I said, look, do all your chats in Google Chats. I need you to do screenshots of them, do snippets of your screen and everything, and let's just start a running log. Well, come to find out, that student had been sold by her father to someone to clean houses, and she was having to clean houses in lingerie. And then that lady took her to get her nails done one day, and because she could charge more for her if she had her nails done. And the lady who was doing her nails was like, hey, cute kid. And she said, well, how much will you give me for? So right there in the middle of a nail salon in a major city in North Carolina, this 7th grader gets sold to someone else. And the dad's getting a cut of what she's now doing with her. And the whole time we're putting bits and pieces of this together. Some of the story we found out afterwards, but we were able to track the student because she kept logging on to school because my school staff knew how important it was through our trainings to get our kids to log on. And so to make a long story short with that is that the father found out we were on to him. And so he started moving the student around and put her with a middleman. And we got to her 36 hours before she was going to be flown out of the country. And he sold her for $3,000.
Now, what kind of sentence does, with the evidence that you can gather, was this man charged? Was he locked up? I mean,
what's the justice? Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how to answer this. Unfortunately, some of that I can't get into.
Okay.
Just because of some of the things that were going on with that, because it was kind of a bigger picture too. But sometimes I have to teach officers that that's not our job to worry about. Let's just help rescue the victims, get them the things they need to eventually become productive young adults and productive people. And just like when you deal with adult victims, just help them get what they need, be an advocate for them, because they don't know if the system's broken. They don't know if the system's not working correctly for them because they've never been a part of the system. but we're part of the system. We know what part A, part B, and part C are supposed to do. And sometimes just staying in your lane is not always fair. It's easy, but it's not fair to the victims we serve.
You just did something that really, really warmed me, because a lot of officers don't know how to do this, and that's disconnect what you just said about rescuing the child or solving the crime, and then worrying about the courts doing their job. A lot of cops get frustrated that they're like, well, he's just going to be back on the street tomorrow, so screw it, and they forget about the victim. But you've kind of been able to peacefully disconnect that. How do you come to that peace? Because
it's all about the victim, and that's why I titled the show "Empathy Amongst the Upheaval," because George, I got that from your LinkedIn, where you talk about your personal mission in this.
That's amazing. That's amazing for your own mental health, but that's got to be taught to a lot of officers. I've seen so many officers get frustrated at the justice system when all their work and the guy who's still walking the streets.
Well, it's just like, when I train new officers and they're riding in the car with me when I used to be on patrol, I would tell them, like, don't worry about what happens afterwards. All you can worry about is the here and now, doing the job to the best of your ability. What happens past the time you do your arrest or your paperwork or your referrals, that's out of your hands. But on the same token, though, is you can advocate for your victims. Just like being a juvenile detective now, I work great with our social services. And part of that is because I know a lot of what they're supposed to do, and I've taught them what I look for. It's so much easier if we work together. If they do their own thing and I do my own thing, well, they can only do so much and I can only do so much. But together, if we go out together from the onset of a case, we can do twice as much in half the time and help kids faster and more efficiently. And so I think that's why it's so important especially for these younger officers, to take the time to learn the system. You have to learn the confines of what you're playing in.
You can operate in, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like football team not understanding the whole rule book.
Exactly. This has been absolutely enlightening. We're going to continue after our next break. We'll be back, everybody. Stay tuned.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. And we are speaking with North Carolina detective, right? Now police officer detective, and SRO Officer George Wilson. George, you better never retire because you are such an asset. I wish I had, and I had some great mentors, but I really wish all this technology and the knowledge that you're sharing with everybody on our platform really could be given to every officer in America, man, because you are definitely an inspiration of a lot of police officers out there. I hope they're listening.
That's the legacy. Yeah.
Well, I will say this. I'm not an SRO anymore, even though I'm still certified. I'm full-time detective doing internet crimes against children, sex abuse cases, elder abuse, and things like that now. But I still have a huge passion and heart for our school resource officers, because I'm a true believer that they're our first line defense in changing the future of America when it comes to our children.
Yeah, speaking of the first line defense, I mean, what is, we've been living in the shambles and in the shadow of this thing called human trafficking, which has come to the forefront over these last 3.5 years. And, a lot of police officers that we've talked to, their hands are tied, or it's not taken seriously, or people are reporting other people, but they're not doing anything. Well, what's like the first thing that we really need to focus on this country to get this thing turned around?
Well, I think one of the most important things I try when I go out and talk to groups of people is, while the movies that we've had come out here in the last couple of years are great as far as getting people kind of hyped up and getting them aware of the problem, very rarely is it a kid who gets kidnapped and drugged across the country. It's literally right in front of us. Yeah. And one, we have to teach everyone how to accept the fact that it goes on in their own backyard. It's not somewhere else. It is here where you're at. I promise you. It happens all over the country, and it comes in many different forms, especially with some of the older officers. Sometimes, they think back to like when we used to do prostitution stings 20 years ago. Well, while that's a tool in law enforcement, you have to approach human trafficking in a whole nother way. One of the best examples I can tell you is here locally, like we had a kid who was a constant runaway. Well, a lot of officers just see that, oh my God, I'm going out to that house again for the 10th or 11th time. This kid is just a troubled kid. And one thing, it's so important for our nurses, our pediatric staff, our ER nurses, because you got to think how many of these kids are taken for involuntary commitments, for mental health checks. Are we asking the right questions at the hospital? Well, this kid, she would be gone for a couple of days and she would be back. She'd be gone for a couple of days and she would be back. And so luckily, as our team in our area sat down and we started looking at this in a different way. Well, when a kid runs away and they have next to nothing and they show back up with, $300-400 extensions, they got a $300 purse. They're wearing brand new high heels. They're wearing brand new jeans. That whole outfit is $1,100. Okay, we need to ask some questions.
Right.
And we need to say, okay, why are they coming in looking like this? Why do they have a different phone every week? Why do they have the newest iPhones? Why are they changing from an Android to a brand new iPhone every 2 weeks? Well, they run away and they come back to school and then all of a sudden they have all this new stuff. These are all the little indicators that we have to teach people in our community to look for. We have to teach our ER staff that when these kids are being brought in for involuntary commitments, that's what we call it in North Carolina, for mental health checks. Why am I seeing this kid 4 times in a month? Okay, are they really mental health issues, or is there something else going on? But our system is so overwhelmed, not only from the healthcare part, but our teachers and our school resource officers and our regular law enforcement. I mean, it's just paper pushing sometimes to people. They're just going from call to call to call, especially in the bigger cities. When you're looking at your screen and you have 40 calls in holding, and you know that I got to just not even check clear from a call before I can go to the bathroom. It's hard to sit down and ask those extra questions when you just see your work piling up on your screen. And so we have to take the time and train these newer officers, and we have to get some of these more veteran officers to kind of reset and remind them why they originally took their oath of protecting and serving. I tell people all the time, protecting's the easy part. That's the really, really easy part. Stopping the bad guy from breaking into a car, writing that ticket. The service part, that's the hard part, because you have to humble yourself. You have to meet people where they are, not where you think they should be. And that's hard for some people. I mean, and it's hard for some officers, especially when they become kind of hardened to everything they've seen and everything they deal with. And so just taking that step back and saying, okay, I'm not here to judge why that person is an addict. Just like I tell some younger officers, you don't know why that lady's an addict right now. She may have had a miscarriage, and the only time she doesn't hear her dead baby crying is when she's high. I'm not here to judge her because I've never been there. I couldn't imagine going through that. But what I can do is I can help them where they're at. Now, if they're doing something wrong or illegal, yeah, let's hold them accountable for what they're doing. But I'm not here to judge them either. Let's help them where they're at, get them what they need. And hopefully by doing that, instead of responding to the same crime for the next 10 years, if we help them get the help they need, we just prevented crimes for the next 20, 30 years. And so now you just stopped 100 reports. They're not breaking in the cars anymore. They're not stealing from your local stores anymore. They're not walking down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning doing whatever they're doing. So it's just a different mindset that we have to get people to start thinking about. And that's kind of what led me into doing the other program we were talking about earlier, which is badges and boxes. Yeah. I saw a real disconnect with our younger officers coming into our profession. When you're 25 years old and you still live at home sometimes, or you're not married, and your biggest decision is, do I need a $500 truck payment or an $800 truck payment? Go on that call with that family that's having to make the decision between paying their power bill and their food bill, and their kids are crying because they're hungry, it's hard for you to understand where they're at in life because you've never been there before. So we wanted to think outside the box and figure out another way to help build those bridges with those officers and those citizens and families. And so the hope was, when we started Badges and Boxes, is we have a warehouse, and those officers who go on these calls and they see these families in distress and need, they can come back and they can make a box of food. They can make a box of hygiene items. And they can go back out an hour or two later and they can go out to that family. And now, instead of that mom or dad screaming at you and cussing you out, they're crying and giving you a hug and saying thank you.
It's kind of like bridging a gap. It's bridging a gap. It's bridging a gap
Exactly.
between the community and law enforcement.
Exactly. That was a perfect lead in, and we got to take our next break, and we'll come back to talk more about Badges and Boxes. Stay tuned, everybody.
Leftovers again? It's time for something we haven't had in a long time. It's time for something right. It's time to make the right choice. OBBM Network TV is always the right choice. Choose right.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with Detective George Wilson of the North Carolina Police Department. Before we left, we were talking about, and we're going to get into Badges and Boxes, but we were talking about officers getting involved. And, one of the things you said, George, was, we could stop this, but I think people are scared to get involved. Like that young girl that you said was being sold into cleaning houses and lingerie and everything else, right? I'm sure there was neighbors. I'm sure there was other family that was around that area. Do you think they knew and they just didn't want to get involved, or they said, that's not my problem? Or are we in a society where people are just now scared to say something, stand up and say something?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I've went on calls before to where maybe we've got a well-being check on a house. And so I go into a neighbor's house and knock on the door, and I come out and I'm like, hey, can you tell me about your neighbor, what their normal, routine is? And they're like, I have no clue who my neighbor is. And then I'll be like, oh, did you just move in? No, I've been here 8 years. And I'm like, what? You've been here 8 years and you have no clue who your neighbor is? You can't tell me what they drive. You can't tell me what the routine is. I don't know in our society when that break started, because I know growing up, I mean, we all knew our neighbors. We knew who lived on the street. Yeah. I know who my neighbors are where I live. I check on them. If they go on vacation, I offer. But I go on calls and people have no clue who their neighbors are. Like, you have a break-in and you go and read the neighborhood canvas and the report that the patrol officers did, and people around that house have no clue what's going on in their neighborhoods.
Everybody's just got blinders on.
It doesn't surprise me unless you need access to their Ring camera, because their crime was committed. Somebody runs right by or drives right by, and they're like, "Oh, really? That happened?"
Yeah. And I think a lot of it's just the technology, and the world's busier today. People, especially after COVID, it seemed to really just do a huge shift in how community involvement was, and hopefully one day we'll get back to people being a little more involved in their communities and knowing what's going on. But it's weird how people will know through online, like kids know other kids across the country because they game with them.
Right.
But they can't tell me something. They can't tell me anything about a kid in their neighborhood.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or
It's sad. That's really sad.
It's true. It's true. I mean, having a teenager myself with the online, and they meet people from all over now, we're keeping tabs on it. It's not like grown adults coming into these.
They got that picture online of all the bicycles on the front lawns on a Saturday morning, where you had 8 or 10 bicycles on the front lawn. Everybody was in one kid's house and they were out playing football in the street. Now the streets are desolate because everybody's gaming. Everybody's on their phones and their computers and stuff. And nobody is...
Well, it started with the kidnapping scares. When I was little, it's like, you can't, you got to watch your kids 24/7. And then it's like, well, what do you do when you're at work or you work from home, and I can't watch my kid all the time. Here's a screen, and it just perpetuated from there. But getting back to Badges and Boxes, it was a way where the officers could provide for those that they took the time. It was like you have to take a time out, take a breath, notice your surroundings, not just like tunnel vision to a victim or a family that you're dealing with, but to really understand what they're going through, to provide, whether it's a hygiene box or, you know, clothing or something for a family or a child. You guys have gone, now you responded to Hurricane Helene, and what we were seeing, or I should say not seeing, on the news, because, you know, you told us a lot that depending on what news you were watching, a lot of what happened there we didn't get to see, and it was worse than
yeah, without a doubt. Whenever someone asks me, whatever you've seen, just multiply it by 10 or 100, because it is so much worse than what people are seeing on the news. I don't really understand why that is. Why, when we've had other natural disasters in this country, you know, for days and months on end, you see just pure disaster, and this time it seems like we're kind of dumbing it down, and I don't know why that is. But I promise you, whatever you've seen on TV, it's much, much worse here in North Carolina. We saw people who were there's, you know, my friend Eric Tansey, he's been going, and he and some other guys have been hiking into areas, and they're still finding families who are gotten no supplies yet, and they're the first people in the last couple of weeks to take supplies out to families. You know, Eric, he's been working really hard. We've been teaming up with him to get supplies in. We've teamed up with so many different other organizations, and our number one goal when we were doing it was we didn't want what we were sending to go sit in a warehouse and then get divvied out a week or two later. So what we did was we networked with local law enforcement contacts, who then put us a lot of times in contact with your churches and things like that. And then you had a group of special forces that went up there, and they set up their own airfield. They set up their own comms. I mean, they were flying helos out left and right, all on their own, long before, you know, the state was even getting going or the federal government was getting going. And so we tried to team up with organizations like that, because whatever we sent, we wanted to hit the ground running. We wanted to make sure it was getting out to the people it needed to get out to. We didn't want it to sit in a warehouse for a week or two, and then people have to drive down a mountain or hike down a mountain because there's not a road anymore. And that's one thing we've been hearing from a lot of people, is they're frustrated because a drive that should take you 30 minutes is now taking you 2 hours because there's no road. It hasn't been cleaned out all the way. You're either having to hike down it, take a four-wheeler or a side-by-side, because your Nissan Maxima can't make it down the road anymore because the road may not even be there. So they tell us, why am I going to drive 2 to 3 hours down, wait in line to get 2 days worth of supplies, and then spend another 4 or 5 hours going right back to my house? Right. All I'm doing is just this vicious cycle of up and down, up and down, up and down. It's not worth it. And so our goal has been to try to get larger numbers of supplies to people so they're not having to do that. So just like with Thanksgiving coming up, normally what we do here where I live locally is we'll do 100 turkeys, food boxes, and hygiene boxes. And we get a list of like new moms from the Pregnancy Resource Center. We'll get a list of shut-ins, a list of foster parents, and we take those boxes out and we deliver it to school kids, everything, to help them during that Thanksgiving break. Well, this year we're also trying to do the same thing, but up in the mountains in North Carolina. Our goal is we're going to try to get tents, wood stoves, because a lot of people right now with winter coming up, I mean, it's already been getting below freezing. It's snowed in some areas in North Carolina already. Well, if you're living in a Coleman tent from Walmart, I mean, they're thankful for it.
That's not going to cut it.
No.
Right. That's not going to cut it. So our goal is to try to get those canvas tents that say if you're going camping in Colorado or Alaska, you can put a wood stove in them and you can actually be semi-comfortable. It's not your home, but it's better than a flimsy little tent that someone got at Target or Walmart.
Oh, you'll freeze. You can't put any heating element inside, those tents from.
No, you'll die.
You'll die. Well, I mean, yeah. it'll also it'll melt the tent. But I mean, yeah. So how big, how can we help? Let's get that out there before we take our next break. We gotta go ahead, John.
What I want to say is the big box stores like the Academies and the Home Depots and the food stores, are they making donations to you and helping you with this, or how are you getting all your, like, the tent supplies and the hygiene supplies? Hotels are a good resource for, soaps and toothbrushes and stuff. How are you getting all your stuff to put in these boxes?
So we've teamed up with Matthew 25 Ministries and then the Nehemiah Project here locally for us. We do pretty much everything with them. We team up together, and then Mercury One and Yakubunya's Ministries. Those are really the core support people who we've chosen to rally with to get this done. The big box stores are making donations up there, but kind of what we've seen is some of those donations are going into the warehouses and they're being rationed out.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But as I said, we've heard those complaints from people, and I completely understand it. Like growing up, I grew up in an area called Brown Summit, North Carolina. I remember it was an hour to the grocery store sometimes, so I get it. We want to be able to help those people get larger allotments of supplies so they're not having to come down the mountains or down through the hollers and stuff to get those supplies every time. Yeah. So that's why we've chosen to team up with who we're teaming up with to get the resources out to the people in the mountains. And we're trying to, like I said, we're teaming up really hard with local law enforcement and a lot of churches to get those supplies out to people.
We got to take our quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation about badges and boxes, and George, and how we can all get on board and help out. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
Rise and vibe with your new elevated morning ritual. Meet Rise by Frequence. Frequency charged nutrition. Rise is formulated with a blend of 7 different organic mushrooms, B vitamins, amino acids, and green coffee bean extract. Rise supports brain health, performance, and focus while enhancing mood, mental clarity, and energy. Enjoy the delicious mango lemonade flavor while giving your mind the nutrients it needs. Get charged up with Rise. Fuel your body and mind today.
All right, we talk about Rise and Imbibing with me and John every week, and Rise is that classification under what's called a nootropic. If you don't know what a nootropic is, they're believed to support healthy cognitive function, mental clarity, and overall brain health. Now, I take Rise every morning along with a source, which is the minerals that every healthy body needs, as my pre-workout because those B vitamins, the amino acids, that little bit of caffeine from organic green coffee bean extract also makes a difference because it's not synthetic. It comes together not only to kind of get me in the zone with the mental performance, but it also provides energy for those extra strenuous workouts that I do, and then takes me through the rest of my day. So the mental clarity, the creativity, the motivation, concentration, alertness, and mood. Rise, it has no sugar. It is keto friendly, and it tastes delicious. And right now we have put together, the holidays are right around the corner. We have put together a special package. So if you go to badgeofhonorhealth.com, you can get Rise on its own, or you can put together Rise and that source, which is the minerals that everybody needs. It is portioned out perfectly. Just combine it together. It tastes great. You can, if you subscribe, you will save money. You can go to badgeofhonorhealth.com. That's badgeofhonorhealth.com. Subscribe and save now. Back to the show with George Wilson from North Carolina. So George, I'm going to put up badges and boxes on Instagram. So if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, just when the podcast is over, hop over to your Instagram, or you may be watching live on Instagram. Hey, Instagram, that's badges and boxes. What are the things we heard about the tents? So the canvas tents, do you need donations of tents, or would you prefer that to be like a monetary donation where you guys can go out and procure, because you kind of know what we need? I've stayed in those tents, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So right now, we're at telling people the monetary would probably be the best, just because we didn't want to get 28 different kinds of tents mailed to us or drop shipped wherever. Our biggest thing is just one thing I've learned through doing this job is you have to learn how to team up with people. If you try to do everything alone, you're going to get bogged down and discouraged. And that's why we've teamed up with like the Nehemiah Project and Mercury 25 and Yakubunya's Ministries, is because it's so much easier when you have that team together. And so we're pushing so hard for Thanksgiving because we don't want people in North Carolina to think they've been forgotten. Because that's the other thing we're seeing is you've got a lot of smaller organizations like ours who are still pushing hard up there. But now that national news is gone, you still have donations coming in from the large box stores, but they're trending downward. They're dwindling. And people don't realize this is not a 1 or 2 month thing. This is a years long project. There are people who have lost everything. And when I say everything, I don't mean just their home and their car. Literally, the farmland they worked was taken away in the flooding. There are people who had acres and acres of farmland that's nothing but pebbles and bare rock now from where the mudslides or the floods took away everything. There are families who farmed sides of mountains. The farmland's gone. It literally just slid off and washed away. There's one family that Eric was telling us about to where they literally watched half their family wash away while they stayed in one of the houses, and they're just like, how do we even restart? They're not leaving, but how do you help people restart when normally after natural disasters, there's some infrastructure left. But what like some people don't realize is when towns say they don't have water, it's not that they don't have clean water. It's that the river shifted. So the inlet for the water treatment plant is no longer near a water source.
Right.
So it's not just getting that water treatment plant back online. We got to get it to the water first to get it back online. Mm-hmm. And some of the cities are bringing their water back online, but the problem is it's not going through a filtration system. It is strictly for flush and toilets. And people are still taking cold baths and showers, or they're having to walk down to trailers that are set up by nonprofits. And like, there's some officers that I talked to that were up there, and they said the line for taking showers in some areas are 2-3 hours long. Wow. They got up at 4 or 5 in the morning. They were going to go take a hot shower before they started their volunteer work for the day. And by 4 o'clock in the morning, the line was already an hour long to get into those mobile trailers just to get a hot shower.
That's unreal.
And then you still have to pay bills. They still have to pay bills, right?
Well,
so
yeah,
I mean, go to work. They still have to pay bills, and
people making house payments on houses that are no longer there.
Right.
I can't imagine how demoralizing it would be to have a house payment on a house that's no longer there.
Right.
Yeah, there's so much work to be done, and George, like you said, we're not seeing what's going on. This was covered like for a week, and then it's like poof. It's not going away. The disaster is still there. The people are in need. It is holiday time. Everybody, if you have a family of 8, set your table for 10. Take those 2 extra spots. Donate it to Badges and Boxes. Again, you can go on Instagram. You also see on their Instagram page, you can get to their Facebook. Make the donation there. George, if somebody wants to reach out to you directly, how do they do that?
So the best way is just send us a message to Instagram or Facebook. Myself and then the Nehemiah Project, we monitor those pages all the time. But a story I want to tell you real quick is I had some officer friends who were up in the mountains, and they called me and they said, hey, I need buckets and plungers. I was like,
buckets and plungers.
Buckets, okay. Why do you need plungers if there's no running water? They said, we need to wash our clothes. And what I realized was they started telling me why. So what they're doing is they're taking 5-gallon buckets, drilling a hole in it, putting the plunger through. They put water in there with a little bit of detergent, put the clothes in there, and they have to churn it with the plungers.
Old school.
And that's how they're having to wash their clothes up there right now. Because like I said, some of the towns that have water that's running again, and I'm putting that in air quotes because it's running, but it's not filtered. So it's literally coming straight out of the source, not getting cleaned, not getting treated. You can't wash your clothes in that because your clothes are what you put on. You're not going to wash your kids' clothes, your newborn clothes in muddy creek water that could have all sorts of bacteria in it. And so that blew my mind that even right now, when we hear stories of the cities getting their water back on, that people still can't take showers or wash their clothes. And so, it never dawned on me that I needed to get pallets of 5-gallon buckets and plungers to send up there. But
all right, yeah. So we're hearing it. So instead of like sending exactly what George is talking about, because can mobilize people to do that, the best thing to do is a monetary donation so that they can go out and buy the things that are being reported back to them that they're in need. And again, these are people that are still in the mountains. There's no roads or the roads have been completely compromised. So it takes them hours to get down, where we have the special forces units that can hike in there, that can airdrop if needed, where the things like tents for winter, not off the shelf at Walmart. These are tents for winter that you can hook up a stove. Obviously, we saw a lot of people donated chainsaws and other things, because you got to put wood in a wood burning stove to heat the tent. So there's lots of things that are still needed. Again, badges and boxes on Instagram, on Facebook. Send a message, send a donation. Let's let the people of North Carolina and beyond, to let them know they're not forgotten, because we got Thanksgiving in here in just 2 weeks, and then Christmas after that. So George, thank you so much.
Thank you, George,
for spending tonight with us. We learned so much, not only about human trafficking, and it seems at every corner it's like we're focused over here, then something happens, we got to be focused over there. And it's just know that we are praying for you, for the work that you do, for the officers that are involved, for the officers that have been affected in the areas, not only in North Carolina, but in Tennessee, and still some in Florida. But you're not forgotten, and thank you for what you do for the kids out there, and just the empathy, the education and awareness that you're bringing into the school system, that you're bringing to communities, because you speak at different conferences. It's been an honor and just a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for what y'all do. And thank you for helping us bring awareness not only to human trafficking, but also to Western North Carolina, because some of those people really do feel forgotten, and they feel like they're second-class citizens, unfortunately. And so we just want to make sure they know that we love them and they're not forgotten about. And also, the quicker we can help them get back on their feet, the less chance that things like trafficking and other things start slipping in there. And so it's a two-pronged approach, and reasons why we want to be up there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. We will definitely be in touch.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay. Wow. So badges and boxes on Instagram or Facebook. Let's get out there. Let's obviously I'll be putting more information out when we put the replay out tomorrow. But God bless George and the work that everybody's doing. I can't imagine.
And Sam and George is still working as an active police
officer.
Right,
a detective. Yeah, full time.
And he's still got a job to do, and he's still doing this. This warms my heart, and this should inspire every individual that's listening to the show. It's the grassroots, the blue collar workers that are out there that are doing this. It's not, I hate to say the government's not doing stuff, but they are, but it's a slow process. It's these grassroots organizations like George's that are really saving lives and making a difference in these people's day-to-day processes. God bless him, man.
Absolutely. So everybody, whatever you can give. Again, it's badges and boxes on Instagram or Facebook, and let's get this done. Because John, you and I, we know a lot of folks. So we can reach out. And again,
I'm gonna put this out I got the 99 on Wednesday. I'm gonna put this out on the 99 as well.
Good.
See if I get some biker communities up there to help.
Yeah, blast it out all over social with a replay tomorrow. So thank you for those that are tuning in every week, whether you're watching us on Rumble, our new Rumble family. We love you. Thank you so much. Whether it's on the Gram or X, and you're new to us from X, I've been getting feedback there. Thank you so much. Our LinkedIn family, we love you on LinkedIn. Keep coming, because we're bringing you some phenomenal guests, as you saw tonight. Hey, for all of everything that's going on with a Badge of Honor, you can visit our website, badgeofhonor.org. We're hoping to be able to travel 2025. We've got some departments in need out of the state of Texas. So let's make that happen. And you can find out everything that's going on by visiting, badgeofhonor.org. To I'll start with our veterans out there. Again, we love you. Thank you so much for fighting the good fight. It allows us to do a show like this every single week. To our first responders out there, you have got prayer warriors everywhere looking out for you, praying for you every single day. Thank you for keeping our community safe. For all of our active duty personnel, and they are all over the globe. They are leaving every single day. So do not be fooled by mainstream media out there telling you our armed forces aren't leaving to go to the Middle East and other places. They are there. Their flights are every single day. We are praying for your safe return. Thank you for keeping our shores safe. John, take us home.
I just got to reiterate for George, badges to boxes. That hurricane hit North Carolina. It could hit your community next. We don't know when the next major emergency is going to happen, and you're going to be asking for help. Reach out to George, reach out to Badges and Boxes, and give what you can, because you know what? You may be in need one day, and you're going to be praying and wishing that George can do the same for you. So support that cause, because we all have to stay human, and humanity is what keeps us alive.
Absolutely.
Peace.
Till next week, everybody. See you then.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.